Hey, welcome back to Painting Trafalgar. Um, this is actually the second one I've done on the same day. I had the two previous ones. I was talking about the more historical aspects and didn't talk about the painting at all. So my last talk was the one where I talked about how the Victory and the 74 gun ship were so similar in their size, despite being classed as different ships. And then I started painting again, working on the painting. So here's the painting that you saw in episode 5, I think it is. And you'll remember that I had been working from photographs of models, and that's in the foreground is my model of a frigate, kind of generic, and in the middle ground and in the background are the 74 gun ships, and the 74 in the middle ground is the big paper mache one, which is now fully rigged, but when I took this photo a couple weeks back, it was just a hull with the masts sticking out. So, compare that to what we have here. I still have the 74 with the masts missing. And I like that because after the Battle of Trafalgar, the ships were all damaged and banged up and missing spars. I'll do an episode. I think the next one I'm going to do is about the HMS Belle Isle. There's a book with the logs reprinted in it, and I'll read Belle Isle's log for the Battle of Trafalgar. But she was the only British ship to be completely dismasted, so she's missing all the spars. The bowsprit, the foremast, the mainmast, and the mizzenmast were all broken off. So in the days following the battle, the weather got worse. The sea kept this gigantic rolling, which is what I'm trying to paint here. So this discussion, a little bit about where we are, is the historical context. This is the day or days after the battle. The frigates are helping by towing the bigger ships and transferring crew from one ship to another in these terrible conditions. I don't see in any of the logbooks any talk of blue sky or sunlight. It just remained cloudy and stormy with rain. I saw one log recently that said that there was lightning, but it was a terrible sea state. They just keep saying enormous swell or giant swell, and I've never been on the ocean in a swell before, but it's like there's waves, and then the waves are sitting on top of this giant curvy swells where there's a whole bunch of waves that appear on a piece of ocean that's rolling by, and that's what these are supposed to be representing. And the idea is that the frigate in the foreground is on its own particular crest of a swell, looking across this swell at what's going on in the valley between the third swell. And I have ranked them as if they went horizontally across, but they shouldn't. They should all have their individual beginnings and ends. So part of this is me struggling in my mind to figure out what it would look like. What would it actually appear like? And I have definitely, like with this photograph, the weird perspective where the horizon line is so high. I was having a very difficult time struggling that when I started doing the painting, because this ship, your brain wants to say that this ship should be like this, and parallel with the horizon, but it's on a surface that's waving, so it has like reached the crest here and come back down the other side, and presumably it's being towed by another ship. So I have not thought too far into, is the ship being towed, or did the tow rope break? They didn't call them tow ropes, they called them cables. And the logs of the days following the battle are full of broken tow cables. The ships were having a hard time struggling to get the ships away from the shoreline. They were within sight of Cape Trafalgar when the battle started. You could actually see it. So in a bad storm, you want to be way out to sea, because your ship is going to be pushed against your will in directions that you can't choose by the storm, by the waves, and by the wind. So you definitely want to get away from the land, which if you hit it, you're going to get smashed to pieces. So there was this fear amongst all the ships that they weren't going to be able to control their own destiny, that the wind and the waves were going to push them onto the rocks. And many ships from the battle did break up on the rocks within sight of the city of Cadiz, which is in Spain, by the way. I have to do a correction. There was a certain point where I was rambling along merrily describing the location of the Battle of Trafalgar, and I think I let it slip that I thought it was off the coast of Africa. I know it's off the coast of Spain. I just misspoke. Africa, if you turn left, leaving Gibraltar and heading out into the Atlantic from the Mediterranean, would be a left-hand turn. And the shoreline that you see on the left as you go through the Straits of Gibraltar, or to the south, is Africa, and the shoreline to the north is Spain and Portugal. But that's it's Spain we're talking about, okay? So yeah, I am painting the sea, and then you have to ask yourself, what color is the sea? When I hold up a glass of water, the color is the color of the transparency of the water, right? But we know if we get enough of that water together all in one place, it becomes the blue ocean. But in the pictures of gray days with stormy seas, the ocean looks gray. So I have on the computer a bunch of files that I have saved. Let's see, what does it say here? Water and sea for reference. So here's a bunch of this stuff. And I went online. Here's a photo I took myself in New York Harbor, this one, where the water looks kind of green. I could never find an image of the sea that looked like giant waves. Here's something that's kind of close. This is a dismasted ship that has been on the rough end of the elements, right? And you can see the white caps all over the place. That's the kind of sea that I'm trying to paint. But in this one, it's not as dramatic as mine. It still looks kind of flat. The camera and the eye tend to make the little wave heights look different than they really are. Like, he went out there and measured the height of these things, the distance between this point and this point. It's really hard to tell because there's nothing to give it real scale. But nowhere have I found a photograph that shows anything like this, where you've got hollows and peaks all the way to the horizon. And when you Google stormy seas or waves and stuff, you get shots that people took on vacation while they're standing on dry land at the beach, looking out at the water. And I suppose if you are on a ship in bad weather, the last thing you're doing is reaching for your camera because you're hanging on for dear life, I suppose. There's a lot of photos of like big storms, a lot of videos online from the wheelhouse of large cargo vessels in big stormy seas. But there's a weirdness to those because a modern cargo vessel, the pilot house is up so high that you don't get this view that I want like this. So in part, I have been looking at the architecture of these waves from the photographs. Like there's a very similar, again and again, jagged line that looks kind of like the cartoonish peak. That's consistent in all the photos of the water. That's just how physics of the water act. But trying to make, to build it and make it bigger. Like on this surface is a closer surface than over here. Here I can just use broad brushstrokes to indicate a texture. But here I'm trying to actually show those individual wavy peaks, and not being terribly successful. I don't think I'm really there yet. But this is about the middle of the painting. I'm not near the end. I'm closer to the beginning, but near the middle. I still have yet to put all the human figures on there. I had a few up here, but they got overpainted. These guys are taking into sale the 4-course, and they'll go on there. It's going to look very theatrical, right? Because it's going to look like a stage. Like this will be like the actors on the stage, and then the backdrop will be all of this behind them. So I think it'll have that theatricality. And it will have a weird two-dimensional aspect of it, because it's going to be like everything up here is dark, and everything back there is going to be this lighter color because it's farther away. And if this was a motion picture or something like that, you could just have all this be the green screen special effects while the actors were in the foreground on the actual set that you built. I'm sure some of the people that are listening to this understand what I'm talking about. But there will be a lot more in the foreground too. There's going to be a lot more rigging, which I've been sort of painting and then painting over. This is the shrouds, backstays, and the stays. And I've been having a lot of fun painting the spaces in between them. Paint up to the shroud, stop, lay the brush back down, paint there, lift the brush back up, paint here. The other school of thought would have been to paint it like this. Paint all this, and then when you're done, paint the dark shrouds in on top of it, right? And I think it's more painterly, air quotes, painterly, to do it this way, where you're being honest about what you can't see, you don't paint. I can't see that tiny portion of the horizon right that's being covered right there, right? So I don't paint it. And I'm only painting the unbroken fabric of visual appearance. I think I used that term once before. And I'm pretty sure I'm misquoting Claude Monet. He was painting the, quote, air quotes, unbroken fabric of appearance. He was trying to paint everything like it was right on the picture plane, and ignoring the fact that some things were farther away and some things were closer. Like if he was painting a wooden chair, he'd paint the legs of the chair the same way he's painting what's behind the chair, and simultaneously. And in that same sense, I should be doing the same thing. I'm painting the shrouds at the same time that I'm painting the background, and then I'm being more honest about applying the paint and reproducing what I would be seeing. Does that make sense to some of you guys? I could be splitting hairs here, but I think I'm getting across this idea that the painting is not just an assembly of elements, and I do everything that's in this element, which would be everything that's 3/4 of a mile away, I'm going to paint, and then stop, and then I'm going to select something else and paint, and that'll be another layer. And I've changed gears in my head. I think Monet, if he was here, and I'm putting words in his mouth, he didn't actually say this, he would say that I should be painting it at the same time, that these things are related because they come up and hit you in the eye at the same time, and you're painting the visual experience as a person who has an eye and a brain processing everything at once. I guess that would open up a can of worms where you would say that some people do see things that way and some people don't. And there's a lot being said about the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain, and some people are right brain people and some people are left, and they have different strengths and weaknesses based on this core idea that you're using one side of your brain than the other. And I encourage you to Google that. I'm not going to go into it now. But I do know that I'm a visual person and that I'm very attuned to space around me. And I'm one of those people who's always aghast when people stop at the top of the escalator. To me, it seems they're unaware of the space around them, and that they must be like a right or left brain thinker. Not that I don't like those people. They're the ones who gave us calculus and all that stuff, right? That's essential. I think that's all for today. Except to say that, this painting is awfully colorful for a day with no sunlight, and I think that is an inaccuracy. Like there's an intense yellow color of this Naples yellow that I'm using for the stripes on the hull, and there's a bright greenish blue color, which says more about a sunny day than a gray day, and I am struggling with that. I have gotten it bluer and I've had it grayer, and then I push it back and forth, which I think is the best way to paint. But I have been, in the last 6 years maybe, learning how to paint the water, and it has been so much more difficult than I thought it would be. I don't think it would be any easier if I actually lived by the seashore and could see the ocean out my window, because I'm trying to paint the open sea where I haven't really been. I've been offshore once or twice, but not in situations where I had these giant rolling swells. And when I was there, I was busy and not thinking about what the water looked like. So this reconstruction in my head of what the ocean would look like has taken me to a lot of places, including looking at the paintings of everybody else who's done it. And I think I'm kind of happy with what I have going on here, because I think I am being clever and unique in my approach. I'm not slavishly copying some other guy. You know, there's a guy named Montague Dawson who painted the water really well. And he had this distinctive sense of it really looks like he wasn't paying any attention, but somehow it came out perfect. And I know that he was certainly paying attention, but his technique made it look like it was just sort of happening without his control. Um, I'm tempted to try to copy one of his paintings, but I don't want to be a slave to Montague Dawson's point of view, even though he was really good at painting water. I want to find my own voice and my own vocabulary for how I paint the water, and in a larger sense, the compositions. You know, everybody's painted Trafalgar. I want my Trafalgar paintings to look different. And I want them to be unique. I want to have like my own artistic vision, which I will have a foot in the world of the history, though. You know, I really want to have, you know, a historian be able to check off and say like, yep, that's how that would have looked. But I also want to have somebody who is more of an aestheticist, somebody who cares about space and form and balance. I want that person to also find the work agreeable. So that's my goal. So thanks. I guess this has been 15 minutes. I'm going to sign off, and I don't know what the next one's going to be. Like I say, there's one I want to read the log of the Belle Isle, because there's some interesting things in there that the Belle Isle story reveals about the overall battle and just conditions on boats in general, and I think it's illustrative to go through it. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye.